my Instagram suggested that I use 2 specific songs to make content on Instagram, but I feel like it'd be more appropriate if I use them on YouTube instead. If you haven't heard, there was a music artist named David under the music alias David with a 4 in the name that's being investigated for allegedly having a decomposed and maybe dismembered body of a young girl named Celeste in the trunk of a Tesla that was registered under his name. She was allegedly found dead just after her 15th birthday, so people have allegedly assumed that she was 14 when she died. The police confirmed that she had a matching tattoo with David. There hasn't been any public arrests or formal charges yet, but that's everything that's completely confirmed by the police and certain news outlets. But I've also been hearing a lot of other things as well. There's been reports of David allegedly managing a Discord that Celeste was a part of, and throughout the years would allegedly make jokes that David rapes her. Apparently David has also been allegedly paying hush money to both the people in the Discord and to people that Celeste knew in real life. But I've also heard that none of the people in the Discord knew of her real age. Celeste also went missing 2 months after a live stream where Celeste joked about David kids, and his chat starts joking about how David's in the Epstein file and that there's a David's Island, but David ends the live stream right after. When her family reported her to be missing, they recited what she was last wearing, which coincidentally matches what she was wearing when she was hanging out with David on social media. David also allegedly made a tweet that sounded related to the situation that Celeste was in, where he refers to someone asking to go back where they belong with their mom and sister, but that they just have to push it through and stay with him. With this context in mind, it seems as though it gets directly referenced in his art. The songs that he's most famously known for are Here With Me and Romantic Homicide. Romantic Homicide is a bit extra eerie considering that most people saw it as a breakup song, but the song was released on Celeste's birthday, and all of his music videos has someone who looks very similar to Celeste, but she also presumably dies by his hand as he stands over her body in the Romantic Homicide music video. In another music video of his, there's a scene in the beginning where he has another woman who looks like Celeste, and a different guy put his own dead body in the trunk of a car. Coincidentally, I heard that Celeste also had an ex named Gus that she had feelings for when she was affiliated with David. In the Here With Me song, he again has a woman who looks very similar to Celeste running around on the beach with him. But in this song, there's a lyric that goes, "I don't care how long it takes," and a lot of people assume that he was referring to Celeste's age, especially since he said in an interview this year that he joked that he wanted to retire and live off-grid on an island somewhere with no social media in 3 to 4 years, or in other words, when Celeste would have been 18. I was looking through the comments on both the Here With Me and Romantic Homicide songs, and of course everyone is talking about his allegations with Celeste. Most people are saying that the Romantic Homicide song is basically a premeditated confession, considering the lyrics and the title. But one of the top comments is, "It's safe to say that it's impossible to separate the art from the artist this time." I've always had trouble with the topics surrounding separating the art from the artist because it almost entirely depends on who it is and what's in the art. With David specifically, all of his music videos have a look-like of a little girl that he groomed and murdered, and a lot of his songs surrounded his life and feelings about her. There was even a song titled after her name that David allegedly had on hand from last year that never got released. One of the lyrics being that he wanted to make her feel suicidal, which is definitely what an innocent man would want their romantic partner to feel like. So many of the comments on his music videos say that they loved these songs and that it was their favorite at one point, or that it helped them get through a rough spot in their life, but now they just associate the titles and the lyrics with murder and grooming, therefore making it hard to separate the art from the artist. I think David is one of the more recent artists that people seem to collectively agree that he is a bad person, even without the final conviction. But it is weird seeing the few people who still try to defend him. Some people will say that some teenagers look like adults, which sure, I can see what they mean when they're talking about older teenagers, but Celeste was 10 at the youngest and 11 at the most when they allegedly met while playing Fortnite, which is even before she hit puberty. Even if she looked older or had a mature sounding voice, 11-year-olds still act like 11-year-olds. I find it ridiculous that people try to excuse what he did because, well, 10-year-olds sometimes look like adults. Maybe in the context of seeing a figure walk by and you thought they were an adult but it's actually a kid, not in the context of grooming a 10-year-old thinking that she was an adult and murdering her around her 15th birthday. I'm pretty sure that those people only defend him because they want to keep listening to his music, but his music can still be good while still being a bad person. I don't want to say that people who still enjoy his song or still have his songs on their playlist as someone who condones what he did, because sometimes they either don't know what he's being accused of or because they associate the song with something completely different. I know that his music can still help people emotionally, and I don't want to invalidate anyone who connects with his art innocently. When the songs first came out, they were widely interpreted as relatable songs about love, heartbreak, and longing. By itself, without any context, Romantic Homicide sounded like a very intense breakup song, and Here With Me sounded like a song about a long-distance relationship. Personally, I just can't listen to those songs without being reminded of what the songs meant to him, because what came out publicly about him changes the context of why those songs were made, and that context is very hard to ignore. I don't believe that the listeners are complicit in anything just because they enjoy a song that didn't sound like it had any relation to grooming or murder, but David still potentially created those songs around grooming and eventually murder. Beyond personal consumption choices, enjoying his his art could still financially support someone like that. Even someone who can emotionally separate the art from the artist should still think wisely about their choices with whether their engagement financially supports someone accused of such serious crimes. I know that he hasn't been convicted of anything yet, but with the concerning documented evidence of the body that had a matching tattoo with David and a car registered to him alone, makes it a pretty hard case to defend. Some arguments that I've heard is that people just don't care about what happens in an artist's personal life, but when the art appears to directly reference, celebrate, or document harmful actions, I feel like it's a bit harder to justify. Art can still be good despite the creator, but it's easier to recognize it as being good when it doesn't tie back to literal murder. A good example of an arguably unethical artist that doesn't incorporate their unethical aspects in their art is Taylor Swift, since she's very famously known to love her private jet. Of course, Taylor's a music artist, and for how much she travels and how rich she is, I don't blame her for having a private jet. But I think the reasons that the middle classers are so upset about her using her jet is that private jets used by celebrities emit a lot more carbon per passenger than commercial flights, yet the economic passengers are still the ones who are usually blamed for the environment being in shambles. Climate change requires mass cooperation and sacrifice, so it feels unfair that someone with immense resources can fly multiple times in private, while many people who can't afford alternatives are shamed or asked to cut back on much smaller things like driving less, taking public transit, recycling, etc. Even though that there are so many people, even her own stans, who criticize her jet usage, they still listen to her music because they either excuse her jet emissions by saying that she offsets them, or they separate that aspect from her music because of how easy it is to separate her. She just sings about loving yourself and men, so it's very easy to enjoy her music without getting reminded of her environmental impacts, especially since everyone impacts the environment in some way, shape, or form, so her problematic aspects are also just a lot easier to excuse than literal grooming and murder. Her music is still arguably good and catchy, but she's still a billionaire who pollutes the environment and doesn't really acknowledge her disproportionate impact. I personally think that people should just stop idolizing billionaires no matter how much of a girl boss feminist they are. I find that female celebrities who do unethical things are a lot harder to criticize just because a lot of people dismiss all arguments as being misogynistic, and it gets even harder when there are some criticisms that are actually misogynistic. It's very weird seeing a female artist get called out for something very reasonable, but sometimes the defense they have is, but I'm not a terrible man. I grew up listening to Melanie Martinez, and she was my favorite music artist for a long time, and I feel like that's obvious because of what I look like, but when I was younger listening to literally all of her songs, I kept seeing comments under videos and reposting that she had been accused of. But every time that I saw that comment, there would always be a reply saying that it had been debunked, so I never thought much of it. At the time, it didn't even feel like a debate, since it seemed like everyone collectively agreed that Melanie was innocent, and that the accusation wasn't worth paying attention to. Years went by, and I never really thought about it again until I saw a video on TikTok by a woman named Timothy Heller. In it, she describes a Google Doc that she made during the #MeToo movement, where she told the story of being pressured into sex by her best friend. In the initial doc, she didn't name the person, but in a follow-up tweet, she revealed that her best friend was Melanie Martinez. Timothy said that she initially believed that telling the truth would protect her, but since Melanie had such a large fan base behind her, they quickly began to accuse Timothy of lying for attention or out of jealousy. Melanie responded to her accusation to say that Timothy never said no to what they chose to do together, which felt relieving because Melanie confirmed what happened. Melanie confirmed that they were intimate on that night. But when Timothy gave an interview to the Daily Mail after the incident, she forgot the exact date. She used the wrong picture from her camera roll to determine the date, and her fans made everyone aware that the date that Timothy released was a date that Melanie was on tour and in a different state. Despite Melanie's initial statement admitting that something took place, she released a statement thanking her fans for analyzing past posts that revealed the speaker's false statements. Apparently, this one instance was enough for her fans to assume that Melanie was innocent despite the contradiction, and Timothy was now labeled as a liar. Consequently, Melanie made multiple songs that were implied to be against Timothy and insinuated that Timothy just wanted fame because she was also a musician, but just much smaller than Melanie. Timothy did gain a lot of attention from this whole situation, but the attention was mostly hatred and spite, with thousands of dedicated hate accounts making up stories and false posts about how Timothy admitted to lying, attacked any company that tried to partner with her, flooded her music with dislikes, and also leaked several of her home addresses, phone numbers, family's addresses and phone numbers, and photos when she resorted to sex work. Timothy eventually stopped doing music to step away from all the hate that she was getting, since all of her accounts beside her bank accounts got hacked, so she didn't see any point in trying to continue her music career. She ends the video by just asking people to believe her and to see the contradiction in Melanie's response. Timothy claims to have never lied about anything, and honestly, I believe her. In her initial Google Doc, she describes her relationship with Melanie as imbalanced, as Timothy was going through a rough patch in her life where she was very vulnerable to coercion, especially since she was also pressured into getting high that night. Timothy said that she said no in multiple ways during multiple nights, which I would assume to be either verbally saying no, said that she wasn't sure, pushing her away, asking to do something else, changing the subject, becoming quiet, or literally anything else that wasn't an ecstatic, clear-minded yes that didn't need convincing, drugging, teaching, or threatening to get. But Melanie was just so persistent that she wouldn't even let her go to sleep until Timothy gave in. And by the way, giving in doesn't mean anything. It's still multiple people that's worked with Melanie or have been close friends with her came out to support Timothy since they had similar bad experiences where Melanie just didn't understand boundaries nor consent. Even one of the stories that one of the supporters came out with also sounded like coerced intimacy committed by Melanie, which is also another form of. This situation gets a lot more frustrating since obviously Melanie's fans still don't believe her because their favorite artist that they don't know personally in the slightest would never ever do that. I know that false accusations happen and there might be a lot of suspicious holes in Timothy's story over the years, but victims typically don't remember every single detail of a traumatic event since it's very normal for brains to try to forget those things to protect their mental state. Melanie confirmed that she was there and what they did that night. She just reframed it as consensual and only backtracked when fans started harassing Timothy. So I find it very hypocritical of fans to assume that Melanie was telling the truth because it was just a little slip up that Melanie forgot that she was there that night and let her fans harass Timothy for years over things that weren't true. Timothy's the one that's lying because she forgot the dates. I swear that I do understand the instinct to defend an artist whose work has meant a lot to you, but it's also very important to recognize that you shouldn't use your emotional connection to celebrities to ignore real life evidence that she might have done something wrong. When I actually started learning about what Melanie allegedly did to Timothy, I began to question if I should keep listening to Melanie's music because I think she only had 2 songs that were directly associated with Melanie's actions towards Timothy. But even setting aside the Timothy situation entirely, I also just began to feel very uneasy with Melanie's portrayals of sexual innuendos in her art. I didn't know this when I was younger, but Melanie incorporates some age play elements into her public art. For those unfamiliar, age play is an adult kink involving role-playing as different ages in sexual context, where one person is usually a child, a teenager, and the partner is usually an adult. Not to be confused with age regression or ABDL. Age regression is a specific kind of coping mechanism or therapeutic behavior where you mentally shift to a younger state of yourself or a different character to feel safe or reduce stress. It's not at all for sexual pleasure or a fetish. ABDL, or adult baby diaper lover, are adults who wear diapers, pacifiers, or baby clothes for comfort, stress relief, or identity reasons. ABDL can be linked to age play, but it's not automatically sexual. While I don't really judge consenting adults for private activities where one of them is not suspiciously young and neither were coerced or had to be convinced, making this public through art can be registered very differently depending on how it's done. Her debut album Crybaby follows a character that she stated is canonically a child, specifically from when she's born to at oldest 4 years old in the album, but some of the songs have a lot more sexual themes that are presented as an edgy or exciting thing for extremely young characters. In some of her music videos, Melanie uses products that are sold by age play sites and shops, which by itself could be excusable if Melanie just used those products to cosplay her baby character, but she uses them while having her child character engage in sexual themes and situations. In her second album, K through 12, Crybaby starts attending school, with each song representing a different grade from kindergarten through high school. When I was younger watching this movie, I mostly just enjoyed the music and liked the aesthetics throughout the movie, and I didn't really notice the more weird things that I've noticed now. Like in the Wheels on the Bus video, child characters flash an adult man with their underwear that spells out "fuck you." Given that these characters are shown to have telekinesis in the story, I feel like there were better ways this could have been handled if the goal was to try to brutally own an old man for creeping on kindergartners. A good example of that is literally later in the movie where both Melanie and her co-star Alita brutally kill one of their teachers after he manipulates Alita to try to dissect her, which is a metaphor for him grooming a student. The song that this happened in is called Teacher's Pet, and a lot of the comments under this video are telling their stories about how an adult groomed them in one way or another. But one of the top comments is reminding people that this song is supposed to be dark because they're annoyed that they've seen so many people romanticize it. In the same video, fans also bring up that it's ridiculous that bright colors and depiction alone is enough for people to call Melanie a creep or a pedophile empathizer because the actual context of the scene and the song is that it's condemning grooming. But I just find that to be a bit ironic because when she performed this song live, she grinds on the floor while wearing her character's school uniform. So I'm confused. Is she bringing awareness to this topic, or did she make this song for people who are into DDLG energy to get hot and mess around till they get numb to. Speaking of which, Alita, who plays the student who gets groomed in the music video, was very vocal about her DDLG incest fetish, and Melanie was very aware of how Alita portrays herself online when they met. So Melanie has a scene where her underage character gets groomed by her adult teacher, and she chooses an actress who has sexual fantasies about being an underage girl in sexual scenarios with older men. I just feel like the real life context changes the intent of the actual message. I don't think the problem is any one of these individual instances within her art. The problem lies in the consistent pattern. I've seen so many fans interpret these songs and even her past songs as awareness rising about childhood trauma. And I see where they're coming from because everyone already knows that the things that happened to Crybaby and her friends are horrible. And I agreed with those fans for a long time. Like, I defended these choices the same way when I was younger because by itself, the art could be argued that she is bringing up these things to portray them as bad things. But the consistent pattern of placing very young characters in sexual context across both albums, combined with the age, place, product usage, and using actors that have those kinds of kinks, just started feeling like something beyond artistic commentary to me. Debunking a few misinterpretations from creators who use Melanie's art as an example of why they don't like her is not enough to change the picture of what those smaller examples make up. A lot of criticism that I've heard people say in one way or another is that the reason why Melanie's way of covering these topics in her music is because it's not her personal story to tell. Right message, wrong messenger type of thing. But I don't think that her portrayals are bad just because she hasn't personally gone through them. Even if you haven't gone through something personally as a creator, you can still cover a topic that's very important to you as long as you're sensitive about it. But the way that Melanie covers them does not have any sensitivity and doesn't seem like an important topic to her at all. She said before that something about the innocence of a child not being aware of adult situations, but is mature enough to deal with it, is an interesting concept that she likes playing around with. Interesting use of the word mature. I really like dark themes in certain types of media, but obviously when I was a kid, I couldn't pinpoint the difference between a mindful betrayal of abuse over an insensitive one. The reason why people feel uneasy about Melanie's portrayals is because she brings up horrific things but doesn't present them in a horrific way. When people use cutesy or bright imagery for their art to represent horror, it's done to contrast the horrific things happening, while Melanie seems to use the color palette as not a contrast but a blended fitting aspect, which just makes the abuse depiction seem like just a quirky, unique thing happening to her character. The way that she presents child abuse and children who experience adult things, otherwise known as CSA, is that she also presents them as consumable because it's simply a concept to her. Now that I'm an adult, I just see her work as something designed more for people who find those scenarios titillating than for survivors who might need genuine representation of their experiences. With the context that she adds so much age play and fetish-coded aspects into her public music videos, it just feels like the trauma she's bringing awareness to is just being eroticized. Maybe it's not done on purpose because it's not like these aspects are in all of her songs, but it's just enough that it becomes too much for me to excuse. There are artists who sing about child abuse and write their songs with victims and how they feel in mind, and they somehow manage to do this without eroticizing what victims go through. The difference comes down to what the intention is and how it's executed, because both need to be good or else it diminishes the entire message. As someone who initially defended her work as dark but important, I had to acknowledge that good intentions don't automatically make problematic portrayals okay. When you add in the rape allegations, the people she associates herself with, and the consistent pattern across all of her works, it becomes a lot harder to give her the benefit of the doubt about her intentions. I've heard people say that we shouldn't use the people that certain creators have around them because associating with arguably terrible people doesn't inherently make the creator themselves terrible too. Of course that's true to a point because being terrible is subjective, but when someone consistently chooses to surround themselves with people who consistently crosses a line, it also raises concern about what the line is for the creator as well. At a certain point, it stops looking like coincidence or ignorance and starts looking like a pattern of enabling. I think an artist that's infamous for that kind of behavior is Nicki Minaj. I stopped listening to Nicki Minaj after she released her song Chun-Li because I thought the song, her choice of clothes that she'd wear relating to the song, and every single performance she did for it was weird. So be aware of my bias as I talk about her. Nicki has repeatedly been called out for siding with people accused or even been convicted of sexual assault, rather than showing any public support for the victims. Her husband is a registered sex offender with a 1995 conviction for attempted, and Nicki has consistently defended him. She also publicly supported her brother throughout his trial, even though he was later convicted of raping his 11-year-old stepdaughter. In both cases, she doubled down in defense of the accused. The situation worsened when the woman that Nicki's husband was convicted of assaulting alleged in court filings that she was harassed, intimidated, and pressured by Nicki and her husband to recant her story. I'm aware that Nicki was dropped from that lawsuit, but those allegations allegations still added to the public perception that she uses her influence to protect sexual offenders rather than standing with the survivors. As I said, I've already chosen not to listen to her music before I even heard about this, but Nicki's repeated choice to publicly defend multiple people accused or convicted of sexual crimes against women and girls also shows hypocrisy in her art as well. I feel like there's a difference between having one's poor actions not mentioned in their good art and then having one's poor actions completely contradict the positive messages in their good art. I am not denying that Nicki Minaj is a good singer and rap artist, but a lot of her lyrics often empathize empowerment and boundaries, yet in real life she defends those who have violated other people's boundaries. And like the fan bases I mentioned before, so many people continue to deny or excuse what Nicki has consciously done simply because she makes music that they like, so who cares? It just frustrates me on how so many people within certain fan bases stay willfully ignorant, because at that point, if you just deny everything, there's nothing to separate. It's just choosing to stay in denial over critical decision making. People's lines for when they should stop supporting a problematic artist differ greatly from person to person, like how sometimes it will depend on how much time there's been since the incident, how much of their art relates back to the problematic actions, and how much evidence there actually is. I'm not telling you that you have to stop consuming good art just because the artist has been accused of doing bad things, but I do think that decision should be made consciously with full awareness of what we know, rather than just dismissing allegations just because we don't want them to be true. You're allowed to draw different conclusions based on the same information. You don't have to boycott every single artist that makes choices that you personally wouldn't make, but there are valid reasons why people do boycott certain artists outside of misogyny or being a hater. You can still enjoy art while still acknowledging uncomfortable truths about the people who create it. But I don't know, that's just me. Laters.